Ethiopians invented Sanskrit writing system. The people of modern Ethiopia have been known throughout history as navigators and shipbuilders, up to the introduction of Europeans into the Indian Ocean. In Sumerian and Akkadian texts, Ethiopia was called Maluha. The ancient Egyptians named Ethiopia Punt. In Sumerian texts, it is claimed that the Puntites traded with the people of the Indus Valley, or Delmun. According to Essa and Kramer and the Sumerians, part of Punt was probably called Maluha, and Delmun was probably the ancient name of the Indus Valley. Today, some scholars maintain that Oman, where we find no ancient cities, no artifacts, was Delmun, and the Indus Valley may have been Maluha. But this is false. Maluha was in East Africa, in what we call today modern Ethiopia. Mesopotamians applied the term Maluha to ancient Kush and Punt, the countries below East Egypt, according to Samuel Noah Kramer and the Sumerians. The Akkadians, according to Kramer, said that Maluha was the place of the black man. Since the Sumerians were called the black-headed people, the reference to Maluha as the land of the black man probably refers to Kush Punt as the original homeland of the Sumerians, or the black-headed people. This was also the homeland of the Dravidians, as supported by the discovery of similar styles among the Kushites and Harappans. The first mention of Maluha in Egyptian texts were written during the rule of Ramses II. Ramses II mentions the Maluha in his letter to the Hittites, where he mentions that he was sending men of Maluha to the Hittite royal court. During this period and later periods, Maluha equaled Kashi or Kush. It seems as though the Maluhites were some very good soldiers. They were very great soldiers, and they were used not only by the ancient Egyptians, but we find that the Maluha, when they came to India, also became very good soldiers who worked for the Dravidian kings. In many texts written by Esarhaddon and Assurbanipal, the terms Kashi and Maluha interchanged repeatedly. The Assyrians frequently referred to the Maluha as Salmuti, black. The Maluhites, according to the inscriptions of Sargon II, mention the bowmen, chariots, and horses of the king of Maluha. Together with the Egyptians fought the Assyrians in Palestine. Later, the Assyrian king Assurbanipal of Assyria noted in his inscriptions that he marched against Naga in Egypt and Maluha, Kush, in order to defeat the armies of Tarku, or Taharka, king of Egypt and Kush. Kramer believes that Delmun was the name of the Sumerians called the Indus Valley. This name, Delmun, could have been pronounced as Tilman. This view is supported by the fact that part of India was called Delmun, an important part of North India, Pakistan, and Saurashtra. This was a major center of Harappa civilization and the Brahmana Dravida. The Harappans or Delmunites often wore braids and headbands. The braids and headband was a common feature of the Kushites and Puntites of ancient Ethiopia as well. The most significant evidence of the relationship between the Maluhites and Harappans is the headband worn by the Harappan priest king and the headbands worn by Maluhite Puntites, recorded on the Hatshepsut mission to Punt and the Kushite soldiers, or Maluhite soldiers in the Egyptian army, as you can see in these pictures. In summary, Maluha was located in Africa. Maluha could correspond to the ancient African nations the Egyptians called Kush Punt. Delmun was the name of the Indus Valley civilization. Since the original home of the Dravidians was Kush, it was natural that many of the Harappans wore headbands and braids like their kinsmen from Kush, Maluha. Due to the mercantile character of the people of Ethiopia, throughout history, Ethiopians sailed their ships on the Red Sea, Persian Gulf, and Indian Ocean. The Ethiopians were great sailors. They established trading colonies throughout the Indian Ocean up to Southeast Asia and India, especially during the Arwe and Punt kingdoms. As a result, they were known throughout history as great businessmen and warriors. The Naga probably came from Kush Punt, Ethiopia. The Puntites were the greatest sailors of the ancient world. In the Egyptian inscription, there is mention of the Puntite ports of Autqualit, Hamusu, and Takaru, which correspond to Adulis, Hamasin, and Tigray. As you can see from these boats that were being loaded by the Egyptians and Puntites, the Puntites had very large vessels that could carry many goods, and these goods were taken throughout the world. The civilizations of modern Ethiopia are characterized by the practice of agriculture via irrigation and terracing. Ethiopians had a knowledge of wheat and barley long before 1000 BC. Soft wheat cultivation was concentrated around the centers of Axum, Harar, and Addis Ababa. The farmers of ancient Arwe used the plow and the hoe, or digging stick, to prepare their fields for cultivation. From here the plow was taken to South Arabia. The Puntites have had many religions before Christianity and Hebrewism. Before their first religion included many gods, but the main god worshipped by the people in ancient Ethiopia was the serpent god Arwe. Other gods worshipped by the Puntites and Maluhites included Sin, the moon god. He was also called Amuka or Awa, Ashtar, the planet Venus, Nuru, the shining one, Baha, the sea god, Medha, the earth god, and Mahram, the god of war. The god Mahram was often identified with the bull. Naga Nagash was the title of the king in the ancient kingdom of Arwe and Punt. The ability of the Ethiopians as sailors is supported by the title Bar Nagash, ruler of the maritime provinces, or Eritrea. This is why the Dravidians recognized the Ethiopians, or Nagas, as great seamen and helped them to establish successful colonies in Asia. Some of the earliest rulers of India were Ethiopians. These Ethiopians were called Naga. It was the Naga who gave the Aryans the Nagari writing system. The Devanagari writing system is a system used today to write Vedic literature and the Sanskrit language. Ethiopians did not invent the Sanskrit language. No, this was an Indo-Aryan invention, but the writing system used to write Sanskrit, Nagari, was created and invented by the ancient Ethiopians. The Nagas were not Mongoloid people who presently live in India. These northeastern Indian people were referred to as Naka in Burmese, not Naga. In Burmese language, Naka means people with pierced ears. The British renamed these Mongoloid Naka people to Naga, to white out Africans from Indian history. These Europeans knew that the Naga of Sanskrit and Dravidian traditions lived in central and south India, not Burma. Ancient Ethiopian tradition supports the rule of Ethiopians of India. In the Kebra Nagast, we find mention of the Arwe kings who ruled India. The founder of the dynasty was Zadesi Angabo. This dynasty, according to the Kebra Nagast, began around 1370 BC. These rulers of India and Ethiopia were called Nagas. In the Kebra Nagast, we read, and I quote, "From the middle of Jerusalem and from the north thereof to the southeast is a portion of the emperor of Rome. And from the middle of Jerusalem, from the north thereof to the south and to western India, is a portion of the emperor of Ethiopia. For both of them are the seed of Shem, the son of Noah, the seed of Abraham, the seed of David, the children of Solomon. For God gave the seed of Shem glory because of the blessings of their father Noah. The emperor of Rome is the son of Solomon, and the emperor of Ethiopia is the firstborn eldest son of Solomon." And in the words, "end of the earth," he makes an allusion to the delicacy of the constitution of women, and the long distance of the journey, and the burning heat of the sun, and the hunger on the way, and the thirst for water. And this queen of the south was very beautiful in face, and her stature was superb, and her understanding and intelligence, which God had given her, was such high character that she went to Jerusalem to bear witness, wisdom of Solomon. Now this was done by the command of God, and it was his good pleasure. And moreover, she was exceedingly rich, for God had given her glory, and the riches of God in silver and splendid apparel, camels and slaves, and trading men or merchants. And they carried on her business, trafficked for her by sea, by land, and in India and in Aswan. Again, here in the Kebra Nagast, we hear mention of India, because India had a long tradition of being ruled by the Ethiopians, even up into Sabian times. I'll continue, and I quote, "And the queen returned and encamped in the city of Zion, and they remained therein 3 months, when their wagons moved on and came to the city of the government. And in one day they came to the city of Saba, and they laid waste Noba. And from there they camped round about Saba, and they laid it waste as far as the border of Egypt. And the majesty, or awe of the king of Ethiopia was so great, that the king of Midian and the king of Egypt caused gifts to be brought unto him. And they came into the city in government. From there they were encamped in Abat, and they waged war on the country of India. And the king of India brought a gift and a present, a tribute, and himself did homage to the king of Ethiopia. He, i.e. David, waged war wheresoever he pleased. No man conquered him. On the contrary, whoever attacked him was conquered. And as for those who would have played the spy in his camp, in order to hear some story and relate it to their city, they were unable to run by the wagons, for Zion herself made the strength of the enemy to be exhausted. But King David and his soldiers, and the armies of his soldiers, and all those who obeyed his word, ran by the wagons without pain or suffering, without hunger or thirst, without sweat or exhaustion, and traveled in 1 day at distance, which usually took 3 months to traverse. As you can see from this text, the Naga Ethiopians ruled India, and that the Indians were in constant contact with the Ethiopians, who maintained a heavy hand in India. Ancient Ethiopian traditions support the rule of the Pontites, or Ethiopians of India. In the Kebra Nagast, we find mention of the Arwe kings who ruled India. This is very important, because we know that by worship of the snake, or serpent, that many in a sense took this religion with them to India. The Kebra Nagast claimed that Queen Makeda had servants and merchants. They traded for her at sea and on land in the Indies and Aswan. It also says that her son Ebna Hakim, or Menelik I, made a campaign in the Indian Sea. The king of India made gifts and donations and prostrated himself before him. It is also said that Menelik ruled an empire that extended from the rivers of Egypt, Blue Nile, to the west, and from the south shore to eastern India. According to the Kebra Nagast, eastern India was ruled by the Naga. This would correspond to the Naga colonies in the Deccan region of India and on the east coast between the Kaveri and the Vegai rivers. Because the Ethiopians had conquered India, they probably called the Ethiopians Naga, which probably meant lord to the Indians. The ancient Ethiopians probably wore dreadlocks like other Hebrews. We know that in many mentions of the Naga, they are associated with dreadlocks. The Ethiopian Naga people who ruled India are associated with serpents and serpent worship. As a result, we find that serpent was a key part of the Naga. It is written by the Dravidians that Nubogavata stands the place where dwell the hosts of the serpent race, a broad-wayed city walled and barred, which watchful legions keep and guard. The fiercest of the serpent youth, each awful for his venom tooth, enthroned in his imperial hall is Vasuki, who rules them all. Explore the serpent city well, search town and tower and citadel. Scan each field and wood that lies around it with your watchful eyes. So as you can see, the Dravidians had many stories that related to the Nagas, or who the Indians referred to the Ethiopians as the serpent race. A reading of the Dravidian literature, which dates back at least to 500 BC, gives us considerable information on the Nagas. In the Indian tradition, the Naga warned central India from the Belavar, bowmen, and Minavar, fishermen. The Naga were great seamen who ruled much of India, Sri Lanka, and Burma. To the Aryans, the Naga, or Ethiopians, were described as half man and snake. Chatabo knew them as warlike people who used the bow and the noose. The earliest mention of the Naga appear in the Ramayana. They are also mentioned in the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, we discover that the Naga had the capital city in the Deccan. Another city spread between the Jumna and Ganges rivers as early as 1300 BC. The Dravidian classic, the Chilapatikaran, made it clear that the first great kingdom of India was Naga Nadu. In other words, one of the first kingdoms of India was ruled by the Nagas. It is very interesting that it would appear that when the Aryans began to invade India, they were confronted first, not by Dravidian people, but by the Naga or Ethiopians. The ability of the Ethiopians as sailors is supported by the title Kebra Nagast, ruler of the maritime province of Eritrea. This is why the Dravidians recognize the Ethiopians as great sailors. Ancient Ethiopian traditions support the rule of Ethiopians of India. The Ethiopian rule of India and the Naga kingdoms is also, in a sense, recorded by the Dravidian scholar Vikanakasavai in his great book, The Tamils 1800 Years Ago. Here there's mention of King Tashaka, king of the Naga, who was fighting the Aryans, who were trying to take control of the Ethiopian cities in North India. The Naga were Buddhists. They ruled Sri Lanka, or Ceylon. In ancient Sri Lanka was called Nagadwipta. The Ethiopian capital in Sri Lanka was Kalyani. In Indian and Southeast Asian art, the Ethiopians and Naga were represented by women and men serpents with hoods. Kanakasabai noted that in the sculptures, the Ethiopians and Naga represent the kings with 5 to 7 hoods. The princesses were serpents, and they had 3 hoods. And ordinary Nagas only had a single hood. The Naga were a dominant group on the coast. Here the Ethiopians were fishermen and seafarers. The Aryans were taught writing and weaving by the Ethiopians, or Nagas. The major Naga tribes were the Maravar, the Ayanar, the Oliyar, the Oviyar, Arubalur, Paratavar, to name a few. The Nagas resisted the invasion of the Cholas for many years. In the Kalitukai, the Naga are described as being of strong limbs and hardy frames, and fierce-looking tigers, wearing long, curled locks of hair. A Dravidian poet wrote about the Naga, and this is recorded by Kanasakavai in his book. The poet wrote, "Of strong limbs and hardy frames, and fierce-looking as tigers, wearing long and curled locks of hair, the bloodthirsty Maravar, armed with the bow, bound with leather, ever ready to injure others, shoot their arrows at poor and helpless travelers, from whom they can rob nothing, only to feast their eyes on the quivering limbs of their victims." The wrathful and furious Madhava, says the poet, quoted above, whose curled beards resemble the twisted horns of the stag, the loud twang of whose powerful bowstrings, and the stirring sound of whose double-headed drums compel even kings at the head of armies to turn their backs and fly. Their power in battle was so much valued by the Tamil kings that they were enlisted largely in Tamil armies. A Madhava chieftain named Nalai Kilavan Nagan served the Pandya as a minister and commander in his army. Another Madhava, Pendakuran, chieftain of a mountain party called Kuturai Malai, was in the service of the Shadow King. As you can see, we find that the ancient Nagas were typified by wearing beards, and they also had braided hair. The Naga kings of Sri Lanka are mentioned in the Mahavansa and are said to have later become Dravidians, as testified by the names of these people: Naganathan, Nagaratnam, Nagaraja, and etc. The Naga, or Ethiopians, were defeated by Dravidian-speaking people from Kebra Nagast. Kebra Nagast is supposed to have formerly existed as a large island in the Indian Ocean, which connected India with East Africa. This landmass is mentioned in the Silappatikaram, which said that Kebra Nagast was made up of 7 nadus or regions. This Kebra Nagast is supposed to have drowned and then flooded, and now lies under the sea. The Ethiopian script has influenced many other writing systems. Y.M. Kabishnor, in the UNESCO History of Africa, maintains that Ethiopic was used as a model for the Armenian writing and was also used by many other Trans-Caucasian scripts. Dravidian literature indicates that the Naga introduced the worship of Kali, the serpent, Murugan, and the sun, or Krishna. It's interesting to note that the god called Murugan, worshipped in India, is also worshipped by many people in East Africa. The major gift of the Naga to India was the writing system Nagari. Nagari is the name for the Sanskrit script. Over 100 years ago, Sir William Jones pointed out that the ancient Ethiopic and Sanskrit writing are one and the same. William Jones explained that the Ethiopian origin of Sanskrit was supported by the fact that both writing systems went from left to right, and the vowels were annexed to the consonants. Today, Eurocentric scholars teach that the Indians taught writing to the Ethiopians. Yet the name Nagari for Sanskrit betrays the Ethiopian origin of this form of writing. Moreover, it is interesting to note that the Sanskrit vowels a, e, u, e, a, virama, etc. are in the same order as Giaz. The Indian Ethiopians called Naga made one important improvement over the Ethiopic alphabet, the script. This improvement was the addition of vowels to the alphabet. The origin of Devanagari as a trade language, or lingua franca, is evident in any discussion of this term. Sanskrit was and has always been mainly an oral language. Yes, Sanskrit was mainly an oral language until Panini and others wrote a grammar for it. This is why neither the Giaz or Sanskrit word providing was ever applied to Devanagari. It is for this reason that it was called Devanagari. Deva means sacred, and Nagari is speech. There is no Indian etymology that explains Nagari as the name for Sanskrit language. It is clear that Devanagari means divine city, or sacred city, or city of God. That is why the term script is placed in brackets whenever you see a definition of the word Devanagari, meaning the urbane script of the deities or gods, or the divine urbane script. There is nothing in Sanskrit that allows the term Devanagari to represent anything but Deva, which means sacred, deity, God, and Nagari, which means city, of the city, etc. For example, let's look at Deva plus other words. For example, Devadamaya, containing all the gods. Devaputra, God, son of God. Deva plus Nade, divine river. Deva plus Linga, statue of God. And Deva plus Nagari, sacred city. Let's look at Nagari and its meaning in Sanskrit. Avanti Nagari, the city of Ugayani. Yama Nagari, the city of Yama. And Indra Nagari, the city of Indra. Again, we see that these words can only mean city or sacred. These Sanskrit examples make it clear that Devanagari has nothing to do with writing. Some researchers have claimed that Devanagari, sacred or being writing, because they want to have an etymology for this term. Yet as noted by Wikipedia and other sites, Sanskrit is often simply known as Nagari. This supports my earlier view that the Ethiopian term Nagari was used to represent writing by the inventors of Sanskrit, which was probably used as a lingua franca by the Ethiopians who ruled India and lived primarily in Indian urban areas. It's very important to remember that whereas the Naga or Ethiopians lived in cities and towns, most of the Aryans were people who were nomadic. This means that the Devanagari, sacred writing, not urbane script of the deity. They used the term Nagari due to the fact that Sanskrit was originally a lingua franca used by the Ethiopians to communicate with their subjects and other diverse people in India. Because of its possible origin as a trade language, spoken Sanskrit required the name Nagari, speech. Since it probably originated as a lingua franca, it was later written in Ge'ez or some other Ethiopian script. When Panani and others wrote grammars of Sanskrit, they continued to call it by the name given it by its creators, Nagari, or speech. This is why it tends to provide a native etymology of Nagari, city, or bane. When interpreting Devanagari fails. It fails about Devanagari was a lingua franca, and over time the proper meaning of the term was lost as various grammarians refined Sanskrit. Brahmi writing and Devanagari writing are not related. Even though people have tried to link Devanagari to Brahmi to give it more of an Indian origin, there is no relationship for Brahmi and Devanagari, as you can see in this picture. In addition, whereas Ge'ez dates back to 500 BC, Brahmi only dates to 264 to 271 BC. As a result, Devanagari has nothing to do with Brahmi. Brahmi is a syllabary, whereas Devanagari is an abugida. A cursory comparison of the scripts indicates that Ge'ez shows more similarity to Devanagari than Brahmi does to Devanagari. A comparison of Devanagari and Ge'ez shows many similar signs, as you can see in this picture. And you can also see that Devanagari and Ge'ez share many symbols and words. This comparison of Ge'ez and Devanagari suggests a stronger influence of Ge'ez on Devanagari than Brahma had. As you can clearly see from a comparison of the scripts, that Ge'ez shows more similarity to Devanagari than Brahmi does to Devanagari. And it was the Ethiopians who introduced this script. The Ethiopians of our way had a very important impact on India. They had an impact not only in the writings that the Aryans use today to write Sanskrit, they also had an influence in spreading Buddhism and the whole idea of the serpent as a principal god for the Indian people. Ethiopians introduced writing to India.